Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natinator. It's a simple question. Do you believe in ghosts? Hold on. I'm not in the mood for ghost stories tonight. Me neither. I didn't ask for stories, I just asked... Hold on. Where's that waitress? Has anyone seen the waitress? Like I said, I didn't ask for stories. I just asked if our new friend here believes. So do you? I don't know about ghosts exactly, but I believe there are strange things in this city. Well, that's hardly news. Yeah, I'm looking at a strange thing in the city right now. I don't mean strange like that. What I mean is... it's hard to explain. Well, I'll say one thing. Waitress! I'll say one thing right now. I do believe. So I'll make you a deal. This next picture is on me, provided you're willing to tell us what you know about it. Don't force him to talk if he doesn't want to. No, I'll talk. It's not usually a story I like to tell, but now that you've brought it up, I won't be able to get it off my mind. You asked me what I believe in. I believe in the city. I've always believed in the city. But it wasn't until recently that I learned what that really means. It all started with my morning commute. The man had lived in the city all his life, and yet he knew nothing about the neighborhood, and that frightened him. He was a worker. In the morning, he took a bus to his first job, and in the afternoon, he took another bus to his other job, and then he took a third bus home. He knew every neighborhood those buses passed through. The Mariner, the Mission, North Beach, No Valley, the Tenderloin, Soma. They each had a personality of their own. Old neighborhoods sometimes died, but new neighborhoods were born all the time. The worker knew them all. Except for one. His morning bus took a shortcut down a narrow, shady avenue with a decorative fountain, empty of water except on a few days of the year, every day. Here was a neighborhood of only a few blocks, filled with large, furtive-looking houses and drooping willow trees and silence. Like all of the city's neighborhoods, it had a name, but people rarely spoke it. In the worker's mind, it was just the neighborhood. He would give it no name more definite than that. He was afraid to. He wondered why the bus passed through these few blocks. No one who lived around here would ever need to take a bus. Nobody ever got on at the stops in the neighborhood, and no one ever got off. And he noticed that people never talked about the neighborhood, even when he asked them about it. It was as if they knew not to. Who lives here, he wondered. Rich people, obviously. Workers like him couldn't afford such houses. They weren't mansions. There were few real mansions in this part of the world, and none in the city. But they were still big and expensive. But most rich people in the city lived in penthouses, or sometimes in the painted Victorians on the avenues. Who lived in these secretive homes, hidden on these tiny streets, in this hilly hollow? This question became even more pressing the day he noticed there were no people there. He'd never once seen anyone on the streets of the neighborhood, or anyone standing in a doorway, or anyone moving behind a window of any of the houses. It seemed to the worker that whoever lived in the neighborhood did not deign to leave their homes, or maybe it was just that, and he could not shake this thought no matter how irrational it seemed, that they simply never left their homes during the day. Since he took a different bus home, the worker never passed through the neighborhood at night. He became glad of that. It seemed whoever lived here didn't want to be seen by outsiders. One day, a woman at the worker's night job took a vacation. His boss asked the worker if he wanted to fill in for her during the morning. Tips were supposed to be better in the morning, so the worker agreed to switch his day and night shifts at both jobs. This meant, of course, that his bus route would be reversed. But that did not occur to him until it was too late. That first day he took his night bus in the morning. The streets looked so different with the sun up, so alive. Worked his night job during the day, took his afternoon bus the opposite direction. He couldn't shake the feeling he was traveling backwards in time, somehow, and finally caught his morning bus at night. The dark streets of the neighborhood, with all the long, clinging willow vines flooded in the evening breeze, lurked ahead of him, and the worker realized that he had been dreading this all day. He chided himself. There was nothing to be afraid of. It was just a street. But look at the faces of the other people on the bus. Yes, they were all afraid, though none of them would admit it. One woman he saw was even holding her breath. They crossed Sloat Boulevard and the first of the quiet houses. The worker avoided looking out the windows. He realized his heart was pounding and he had to force himself to breathe. The steady hum of the bus tires comforted him a little. It took less than a minute to cut through the neighborhood. They'd be safe soon. He found himself turning toward the window. He didn't want to scratch, the worse it got. He couldn't help but turn. Was it his imagination? Or was the woman sitting across the aisle trying to warn him with sideways glances and half-hidden gestures not to look? He couldn't be sure. Heart pounding, he turned all the way and he looked into the darkness. He saw nothing. Nothing except the same streets and the same houses as always. The same leaning trees and the same showy fountain. There was nothing strange or sinister about it after all, and he laughed at himself. How childish his fears had been. It was just a neighborhood for rich snobs who liked their privacy and were probably annoyed by the loud, smelly city bus that drove down their private little avenue 100 times a day both ways. In fact, now that he was not so afraid, he realized that it was really a pleasant-looking little neighborhood. It was inviting. Only half aware of what he was doing, The worker rang the bell. Several people in nearby seats jumped. No one ever rang the bell for a stop in the neighborhood. But the worker just had. The driver glanced at him and then looked away. The woman across the aisle was now very clearly looking at the automatic door hissed open, and then he was outside the protective shell of the vehicle and setting foot, for the first time in his life, on the streets of the neighborhood. The woman who'd tried to warn him stared down from a window, her face bleached and her eyes wide. But then the snap of the automatic door and the hum of the tires whisked her away, and the worker was alone. It was a warm night. There was no moon. A small breeze was, as always, coming from the direction of the ocean. The stirring of the willows was the only noise. The worker looked around. Something was strange. The streets were deserted, as usual, but there was something about the houses. He realized there were no lights on in any of them. Every window was dark. The breeze turned cold, and the worker rubbed his bare arms. He now felt foolish for getting off the bus and making himself late. He didn't understand why he'd done it, and the old fear was creeping up in him again now, as all those dark windows, like the empty eye sockets in a pile of skulls, stared at him. He didn't want to wait here for the next bus, so he started to walk. The top of the hill would be better, he reasoned, safer. He tried to keep his eyes on his feet, but again, he found he couldn't help glancing from side to side. He prayed for a sign of life anywhere, something to reassure him, but it was all darkness and silence. Nothing here looks lived in, he thought, realizing that had been the disquieting quality of the neighborhood all along. It was less like a real neighborhood, as much like a museum display of how a neighborhood might look. No one who saw these streets for even a second would mistake them for the habitat of any living thing. This he had always known, deep down, even if he only just now knew how to articulate it. He walked faster. It seemed to the worker that the hill was steeper than usual. All rich neighborhoods in the city were built on hills. Was the grade becoming more severe so as to slow him down? Absurd, he thought. Then the wind changed direction, blowing in his face hard enough to make him take a half step backward, like a hand trying to hold him in one place. The houses crouched on their lots, waiting for him. The windows were dark, the doors were closed, He stopped. One door was open. On the little cream-colored house with the tile roof. It was wide open, in fact, revealing a dark hallway beyond. The worker looked around. Still no one in sight. Why should this door be open in the middle of the night? He wondered. It did not look like anyone was home. A house like this should be locked at night. Perhaps there'd been a robbery. Perhaps someone was hurt. Perhaps... He was walking toward the door. He didn't want to, and he had not thought about doing it. Just as he hadn't really thought about getting off the bus. But still, he was walking toward the door. The toe of his work boots tapped the stone porch steps on his way up. Why am I doing this? He thought. But it was already too late. The door was open, and he was inside. The house closed up around him.